David, a creature of habit and caffeine, navigated the labyrinthine streets of Portland each morning with a single-minded purpose: his coffee. His life revolved around the bitter warmth, the stimulating jolt that transitioned him from the haze of sleep to the sharp focus of his digital design work. He frequented a rotation of familiar haunts, each with its own specific blend and ambience. But lately, a subtle ennui had set in. The predictable comfort had curdled into a dull routine, leaving him craving an unknown, an experience that transcended the mere act of drinking coffee. One particularly misty summer morning in 2024, a faint, almost imperceptible shimmer caught his eye on a street he'd sworn he knew by heart. Tucked away on a narrow brick-lined alley, nestled between a thriving tattoo parlor and a discreetly opulent florist, stood the Third Wave Brew. He'd passed this spot countless times, yet he couldn't recall ever seeing this specific establishment. Its facade was a stark contrast to its neighbors: obsidian dark glass reflecting the gray sky, and a single unadorned wooden door that seemed to absorb all light. A strange, almost magnetic pull drew him closer. There was no bustling crowd, no enticing sidewalk tables, just an oppressive quiet that clung to the air around the shop, a silence that felt ancient and undisturbed. Yet, despite the lack of conventional allure, an inexplicable curiosity tugged at him. It wasn't the inviting aroma of roasting beans that typically drew him in, but something far more subtle, a peculiar coldness in the air, a faint whisper that seemed to beckon him from within the darkness of the entrance. He pushed open the heavy wooden door, which swung inward with an almost imperceptible creak, revealing an interior that was both breathtakingly minimalist and deeply unsettling. Polished concrete floors stretched into an expansive cavernous space, illuminated only by sparse, recessed lighting that cast long dancing shadows. The air inside was several degrees colder than outside, carrying a faint, cloying scent of something metallic and damp, like old coins and wet earth, mixed with an undertone of burnt sugar tucked behind a massive monolithic counter of dark, unidentifiable stone stood a single barista. Her face was obscured by shadow, her movements unnervingly precise as she operated gleaming, silent machines. There were no visible menus, no price lists, no chalkboards displaying daily specials. The entire setup radiated an aura of quiet efficiency that bordered on the uncanny. David felt a prickle of unease, a sensation akin to walking into a dream. Yet he found himself incapable of turning away. "What do you have?" David asked, his voice sounding strangely hollow in the vast echoing space. The barista slowly raised her head, revealing eyes that seemed too dark, too still, like pools of stagnant water. Her lips, a pale shade of gray, parted in a faint, unsettling smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Only what you truly desire," she whispered, her voice a dry rustle, like leaves skittering across pavement. A shiver ran down David's spine. But the oddness of the encounter only deepened his fascination. He wanted coffee, a powerful, awakening brew. "A black coffee," he managed, his voice slightly strained. The barista nodded, her movements fluid and silent as she prepared his order. He watched, mesmerized, as she poured the dark liquid from a gleaming pitcher into a stark white ceramic mug. No steam rose from the surface, a peculiar detail he noted with growing disquiet. He took the mug, its ceramic cool, almost icy, against his fingertips. The liquid inside was an impenetrable black, reflecting nothing, seeming to absorb the scant light in the room. He raised it to his lips, a strange sense of anticipation, laced with a burgeoning fear, gripping him. The first sip was an immediate jolt, not of caffeine, but of something far more profound. It was intensely bitter, yet strangely exhilarating, with notes of scorched earth, ancient wood, and a distinct, almost painful clarity. But it was the aftertaste that truly unnerved him, a lingering phantom sensation, a chilling whisper that seemed to echo directly in his mind, carrying with it a profound sadness and a sense of desperate urgency. It was as if he had swallowed not just coffee, but a fragment of someone's sorrow. He felt an instant piercing headache bloom behind his eyes, a throbbing pain that intensified with each subsequent sip, yet he couldn't stop. The coffee, despite its unsettling effect, was utterly compelling. Leaving the third wave brew that morning, David felt a profound shift within him. The world outside seemed sharper, colors more vibrant, sounds more piercing. But it wasn't a pleasant awakening. It was as if a thin veil had been torn, revealing a subtle, disturbing undercurrent to his familiar city. He felt an oppressive weight, a deep melancholy that wasn't his own, clinging to him like a shroud. Little did he know, this unsettling feeling was just the beginning, a prelude to the haunting symphony that had just begun to play in the depths of his very soul. David found himself drawn back to the third wave brew every single morning, a ritual that quickly eclipsed all his previous coffee habits. The headaches, initially sharp and piercing, evolved into a dull, constant throb behind his eyes, an almost meditative rhythm that now accompanied his days. The melancholic whispers, once a mere aftertaste, deepened into a pervasive internal murmur, a chorus of faint, sorrowful voices that seemed to resonate just beneath the surface of his own thoughts. He noticed other changes, too subtle at first, then increasingly undeniable. His apartment, once a beacon of minimalist order, began to feel occupied. Objects would subtly shift. A book moved from one shelf to another. A chair pulled slightly away from his desk. He'd dismiss it as forgetfulness, a byproduct of his escalating obsession with the coffee. But a persistent chill lingered in the air of his living room, even on the warmest summer days. The dreams, always vivid for David, transformed into a nightly descent into a shadowy spectral version of the third wave brew. He would find himself standing alone in the cavernous space, the silence profound, but punctuated by the faintest sounds, a soft sigh, the whisper of movement just out of sight, the distant, sorrowful chime of an unseen bell. The barista would never be there, but he felt an overwhelming presence, a multitude of unseen eyes watching him from the oppressive darkness. During the day, the veil between his reality and the coffee shop's peculiar influence thinned further. He'd be working, focused on a design, when the sharp, Clean lines of his monitor would momentarily shimmer, replaced by the blurred outlines of antique furniture or the ghostly echo of a conversation he couldn't quite grasp. The scent of metallic dampness, the signature aroma of the coffee shop, began to permeate his own home, clinging to his clothes, his bedsheets, even his skin. His friend started to comment, "You look tired, man." His usually oblivious roommate, Alex, remarked one evening, his brow furrowed, "And you're always zoning out. Is everything okay?" David brushed it off with a forced smile, attributing it to a new, demanding client. But the truth was, his energy was being subtly drained, replaced by a growing, inexplicable exhaustion that no amount of sleep seemed to alleviate. It was as if something within him was slowly, imperceptibly, being siphoned away. The barista at the Third Wave Brew remained as enigmatic as ever, her pale lips still curved in that unsettling, unreaching smile. David tried to probe her again, about the shop's history, about the unique quality of the coffee, but she would simply refill his black mug with an unnerving grace and avert her dark, still eyes. Her silence was more eloquent than any words, conveying a deep, ancient knowing that both fascinated and terrified him. He began to see fleeting reflections in the polished surfaces of the coffee shop, not his own, but faint, distorted images of other faces, contorted in silent anguish, their eyes wide with a desperate, unspoken plea. They were gaunt, spectral forms, shimmering for a split second before vanishing. Each time he'd blink, convinced it was a trick of the light, a figment of his sleep-deprived mind, yet the chilling sensation of being watched intensified. One morning, as he raised the cool black coffee to his lips, a sudden, piercing chill enveloped his hand, a cold so intense it felt like a burning frostbite. He gasped, dropping the mug, the obsidian liquid splashing across the polished concrete floor like spilled ink. For a terrifying second, the dark liquid seemed to writhe, and he swore he saw faint, swirling faces trapped within its depths, their silent screams echoing in the sudden profound quiet of the shop. The barista, instead of reacting to the broken mug, simply stood still, her head tilted slightly as if listening to something beyond human hearing. Her unsettling smile deepened, and for the first time, David felt a wave of pure, unadulterated terror. He looked at the shattered ceramic, at the dark liquid slowly spreading, and understood with a sickening certainty. The coffee wasn't just influencing him. It was a conduit, a vessel for something ancient and suffering. He stumbled out of the Third Wave Brew that morning, leaving the broken mug behind, a cold sweat drenching his clothes. The phantom headache raged, and the chorus of whispers in his mind swelled into a cacophony of mournful cries. The oppressive weight that clung to him was no longer just melancholy. It was the chilling, desperate presence of others, unseen and unheard, clinging to his very soul, seeking an escape through the conduit he had so foolishly, so addictively opened. The shattered ceramic and spilled coffee marked a terrifying turning point. David did not return to the Third Wave Brew the next day, nor the day after. He wanted to, desperately, the insidious craving for that dark, potent brew, a relentless, ache in his very bones. But the memory of the writhing faces in the spilt liquid, the barista's knowing smile, and the overwhelming dread that had clung to him held him captive in his own apartment, a prisoner of his escalating fear, yet abstaining from the coffee did not bring relief. The chilling symptoms only intensified, as if the withdrawal amplified the haunting. The headaches became migraines, each throbbing pulse echoing the mournful whispers that now seemed to fill every corner of his mind. The subtle shifts in his apartment escalated. Doors would swing open and close with gentle sighs. Faint footsteps echoed from empty hallways, and the cold spots solidified into distinct, icy presences that brushed against his skin. His dreams, once confined to the spectral coffee shop, now invaded his waking hours. He would see fragments of past lives, fleeting images of individuals consumed by sorrow and despair. There were glimpses of a young artist, his canvases perpetually stained with tears. An elderly woman, her hands clasped in prayer, her eyes filled with an unbearable grief. A laughing child, suddenly silenced, replaced by an echoing cry. All of them, he realized with a growing horror, seemed to emanate from the very fabric of his own apartment. The scent of metallic dampness, the coffee shop's signature aroma, intensified to a suffocating degree. It clung to him, pervaded his clothes, even seemed to seep from his skin, making him feel as though he was perpetually submerged in a forgotten crypt. He tried airing out his apartment, scrubbing surfaces, burning incense, but the smell persisted, a constant chilling reminder of the unspoken horrors he had invited into his life. Sleep became a terrifying ordeal. He would often wake to the sensation of being watched, his eyes snapping open to perceive faint shimmering outlines in the oppressive darkness of his bedroom. Sometimes, a cold hand would gently brush his cheek, or a whisper, clearer than any before, would breathe a name, not his own, but a name heavy with an ancient sorrow, directly into his ear. He felt their presence, a multitude of souls clinging to him, yearning for something he couldn't provide. His exhaustion grew profound, not merely physical, but a deep soul-sapping weariness. He tried to work, to engage with his usual routines, but his focus was shattered, his creativity replaced by a chilling premonition of impending doom. He saw the spectral faces from the coffee shop more clearly now, not as reflections, but as fully formed apparitions, their eyes, filled with an unbearable anguish, fixed on him with a desperate intensity. They were silent, but their sorrow was deafening. He tried to talk to Alex, his roommate, about what he was experiencing, but the words felt hollow, inadequate to describe the creeping madness that was consuming him. Alex, increasingly concerned, suggested he see a doctor or perhaps a therapist, dismissing David's claims of ghosts and haunted coffee as stress-induced delusions. The isolation intensified as David realized he was truly alone in his horrifying ordeal, forced to bear the weight of these unseen burdens. One afternoon, a chilling discovery solidified his worst fears. As he paced his living room, the cold air raising goosebumps on his arms, his foot brushed against a loose floorboard near the bookshelf. Curiosity, or perhaps an instinct guided by the unseen presences, prompted him to pry it open. Beneath, wrapped in a brittle yellowed cloth, lay a tarnished silver locket and a small, leather-bound journal, its pages brittle with age. His hands trembling, David opened the journal. The elegant, faded script detailed a harrowing account of the coffee shop's past. It spoke of a young woman, a poet named Ilara, who had owned the shop centuries ago, a place of vibrant artistry and passionate debate. But then, a dark, creeping shadow had fallen over it, a malevolent entity that slowly consumed the life force of those who frequented it, leaving them hollow, lifeless husks, their souls trapped within the very walls, their essence infused into the coffee they consumed. The final entry, scrawled in a frantic, almost illegible hand, was Ilara's last desperate plea, a warning to anyone who dared to partake in the brew, ending with the chilling revelation that her own life force was being drained, her very soul becoming part of the shop, its enduring, mournful essence now trapped within its silent, dark walls. David dropped the journal, his mind reeling. He wasn't just experiencing the remnants of past lives. He was becoming the next vessel, the next unfortunate soul to be absorbed into the chilling, haunted essence of the third wave brew. The revelation from Ilara's journal was a cold, hard truth that shattered any lingering doubt. David was not merely haunted. He was slowly, meticulously being consumed. The cold in his apartment, the spectral whispers, the crushing exhaustion. They were not symptoms of a haunting, but the deliberate, methodical process of his own life force being siphoned away, added to the macabre blend served at the third wave brew. He understood, with a horrifying clarity, that the shop was not just a place, but a living, malevolent entity, forever hungering for fresh souls. Desperate, he considered fleeing Portland, escaping the city that had become his gilded cage. Packed a bag, his movements frantic, but a profound lethargy weighed him down, as if invisible chains bound him to his apartment. Every step was an effort, every breath shallow. He felt their presence, the multitude of souls drawn to him, their silent pleas for release now morphing into a desperate, clinging hunger that mirrored his own fading vitality. His perception of reality continued to unravel. The spectral faces that had once been fleeting glimpses were now ever present, swirling around him, their gaunt features contorted in silent agony. He saw Ilara, her form clearer than the rest, her eyes fixed on him with a chilling understanding, a mirror of the despair she had once known. She was not a threat, he realized, but another victim, a silent warning etched into the very air he breathed. One evening, as the last vestiges of daylight bled from the sky, a chilling phenomenon began. The metallic, damp scent of the third wave brew began to emanate directly from him. His skin felt clammy, his hands cold to the touch, and the air around him seemed to thicken with the coffee shop's signature oppressive aroma. It was as if his own body was becoming infused with its essence, transforming him into a living, breathing extension of the haunted place. The whispers in his mind no longer felt external. They were his thoughts, or rather, the thoughts of countless others, all superimposed upon his own. Fragments of their lives, their sorrows, their artistic passions, their final moments of despair, swirled in a chaotic symphony within his skull. He felt their collective hunger, their desperate yearning for connection, for release, for something to fill the vast emptiness within them. An emptiness that was now growing within him. Too, he stumbled to his mirror, his reflection a horrifying distortion. His eyes, once vibrant with life, were now sunken, shadowed, and too dark, mirroring the unblinking, stagnant gaze of the barista. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and a faint, unsettling shimmer seemed to emanate from his very being, like the obsidian liquid of the coffee itself. He was becoming one of them, another trapped soul, another ingredient in the perpetual brew. A profound, chilling understanding settled over him. The barista, with her unblinking eyes and unsettling smile, was not merely a servant of the shop. She was its embodiment, the ultimate, perfect vessel for the cumulative essence of all who had been consumed. She had not aged, for she was a timeless repository, a living monument to the perpetual extraction of life and soul. Her calm, precise movements were the ancient, unbroken rhythm of the shop's dark purpose. The craving for the coffee, which had been a painful ache, now became an overwhelming, unbearable thirst. It was no longer a desire for caffeine. It was a primal, desperate need to replenish the very essence that was being drained from him, a futile attempt to stave off the inevitable. He understood then that the obsession was a trap, the final, inescapable lure, drawing him back to the source of his undoing. With the last of his fading strength, driven by an instinct beyond his control, David found himself pulling open the heavy, dark door of the third wave brew one final time. The cold enveloped him instantly, the scent of metallic dampness assaulting his senses. The interior was as silent and stark as always, the barista standing behind the monolithic counter, her dark eyes now gleaming with a profound, knowing satisfaction as he stumbled towards her. He reached the counter, his hand trembling as he instinctively pushed forward a silent, unspoken request. The barista's pale lips curved into her widest, most unsettling smile yet, a grim, triumphant rictus. She poured him a mug of the obsidian liquid, no steam rising from its surface. As David raised the icy ceramic to his lips, his vision blurred. The voices in his head crescendoed, and the last of his life force drained away. He felt a profound lightness, then an endless, cold silence. The barista meticulously cleaned the mug, her movements still precise, her dark eyes already scanning the street, waiting for the next caffeine addict to succumb to the irresistible lure of the third wave brew.